Gary DePaul with Unlabeled Leadership. Welcome to Episode 7, Felix Nater Instills Creativity and Ideation. Let's get started. Felix Nater can tell you several stories about his time in the Army, Army Reserve, and U.S. Postal Service. As a postal inspector, he's investigated several things from burglary, mail theft, armed robbery, and violent crimes. He's conducted hundreds of threat assessments. As a consultant, he's worked with several companies to help them with workplace violence prevention. Now, with his past, he's dealt with a lot of violence just by the nature of his work in the Army, in the Postal Service, and now working with companies. When talking with him, you don't get the impression that Felix is hardened or guarded by all that he's experienced in his career. Instead, he emulates kindness. The people I know in armed forces, both military and law enforcement, they're good people. I would describe them as forthcoming, honest, and resilient. They show integrity and they're good people. Kindness is not the first thing I think of when I've met all these people, although they do have a lot of kindness in them. When I met Felix about 5 years ago, that's how I thought of him. Someone who just is kind. When I think of someone investigating a threat, I don't think of kindness as being one of the characteristics. Maybe that's my bias. I don't know. But with Felix, I'm pretty sure that he does emulate kindness even when he's investigating violence. Maybe that's a paradox, or maybe there's something we could learn from Felix about kindness. Part 1, Fostering Stewardship. In my work, I surround myself with people who are stewards. Most have had successful careers and they're well established. When I say steward, I mean someone who looks out for other professionals in their field, someone who gives back by being keynote speakers, authors. The best are the ones who spend time with you personally and try to help you along the way. In this story, Felix shares how someone nudged him towards that stewardship. Here's Felix.
I was the only male carrier. Get that? Male carrier of color.
Ah.
There were two black females, Vicky, and I forget the other gal's name right now. But the other gal was the one who gave me my first apartment through her sister. So I was the only black male carrier in the office. Everybody else was white, and they had their attitudes towards people of color that I let rub off. Roll down my back like water off a duck's back. The day that I walked into the office, it was my first day was about 6 a.m. I saw a lot of the carriers as I walked up the ramp through the window. And because I had been good at listening through training with one earpiece on my ear and one on the other, I was also adept at reading lips. And as I walked into the building, a guy who I now know as Vinny says, "Jesus, an effing spook." I said, well, this is going to be difficult for me. But make a long story short, I never judged a book by its cover. And one day, a postal inspector was in the building as part of his duties, and he was directed by the postmaster to speak to me about an opportunity that the postmaster felt was ready-made for me. And they were creating a postal security organization, the first of its kind. And they were looking for people like me with military experience and who were, college bound for the future. And he said, after the interview, I said to him, I don't have a degree and I didn't finish the military, in the true sense of it. So I'm not really the best candidate. And he floored me. He said, what if I walk you through this process and you give me the opportunity and things turn around? Would you do the same for somebody else in your future that needed the kind of help I'm going to give you. Floored me, Gary.
That's incredible.
Floored me. And this is the first person I've ever shared that story with. Isn't that something?
That is something. Tell me what happened after that.
I complete the full application.
Yeah.
And I go through the background investigation like there was nothing ever in my background that would raise any concerns. I became the second class to attend the Postal Service Security Academy in Potomac, Maryland. The first class were all the supervisors, and the second class were the future supervisors. And the rest is history.
And you've had a long and accomplished career with the Postal Service. Retired with them?
Yes. Yes, it was after I was selected for the Postal Security Organization, I was pulled up again to be a special investigator with the same organization, with Postal Inspection Service. Not a position that I had sought or desired to be in because I was having fun being a security guy. Pulled into that position as special investigator, doing a great job there. My boss, a postal inspector himself, commends me, my attitude and all that. And he says, you're going to be a great postal inspector. And I said, I don't have a degree. And he says, no, we understand that. Just keep working ahead and things will work out. And the Lord works in mysterious ways, and there was a class action suit filed by a bunch of older special investigators who were contending that the only difference in the work that we did were our titles: special investigator, postal inspector.
Okay.
And of course the pay. And these guys won the class action suit. And my boss said, I just want you to know that I didn't want you to be reassigned from me because you're such a contributing member of our team, that now that you're a postal inspector, I'd like for you to stay on and work with me if you like. Otherwise, you have a choice of assignment. And I stayed on working with this gentleman who was instrumental in helping me forge my way of thinking, continuing to harness my energy and my skills. And I became what they would say years later, a seasoned veteran postal inspector.
I'm going to speculate that a lot of that experience has to do with your character and a few people recognizing the character that you have.
That's an outstanding correlation, and I'll tell you why. Today, our society is in a state of confusion because they measure tangibles and not the intangibles, and character is an intangible that supersedes the perception of a lack of something. Because with character, the observers notice what they like, and they pull you up like the young men who were pulled up in the Battle of Iwo Jima. They were overrun, but they had character about themselves. Never to give up. Believe in themselves, believe in their organization. Today, everything is about money. Everything's about a job. Everything's about how do you perceive me? Clashes in relationships, clashes in classes, clashes. Everything is a me, as opposed to that intangible thing that I call character, resiliency, reliability, dependability, trustworthiness, integrity. Those are the intangibles that really are tangible when you see it through fruition.
Part 2, Scrutiny Reduces Capability. If you're fortunate, you know people who can change the dynamics of a team just by participating and interacting. When they become involved, people tend to generate ideas, they become more creative, and they can even become more productive than they normally would be. The story that Felix shares is not about people like that. In fact, it's about the opposite. Here's Felix with his story.
General Terrell and I were at Fort Dix, New Jersey, back in the late 90s, rather, what we call sampling, evaluating firearms qualification weekend of several units that were down there. And the general would go his way, I'd go my way, and then we collaborate before we leave and discuss issues and situations that needed to be discussed. And this particular morning was very, very humbling and learning, if you would. I heard this sergeant yelling at the top of his voice on the firing line, and it caught my attention. So I removed myself from the general's presence, and I excused myself, and I got closer to the firing line, and I'm hearing this this firearms training guy yelling and screaming, and I got closer, and I saw he was yelling at a young soldier in a foxhole. So I went up to the tower and I said, do me a favor, can you stop the firing for a second, please? Sure, Sergeant Major, what's up? So I said, that's okay, it's personal. So I got this platoon sergeant, training institute, and I said, what is your problem? What are you yelling at? Don't you know this is a firing line where people need to be cool, calm, and collected? What's going on? He says, that female, she can't zero her weapon. I says, first of all, she's not a female, she's a soldier, number one. Number two, if she can't zero that weapon, maybe there's something wrong with you. And he says, what do you mean, Sergeant Major? Well, you should be jumping in that foxhole like I'm going to do. And he says, you can't do that. And I says, watch me. I cleared the line. And I jumped into the foxhole and I says, what's your problem, soldier? And she says, well, Sergeant Major, I went through basic training. I zeroed my weapon and qualified in basic training, but I'm having a hard time zeroing my weapon this morning. And I said, can you tell me why? And she says, he's always yelling at me. He's always yelling at people. So I said, they get 9 rounds. So I said, okay, I'll put you through these 9 rounds, and I'll guarantee you with my presentation and my style, you will zero that weapon within 6 rounds.
Tell us what zeroing your weapon means.
Zero is sighting the front sight and the rear sight in alignment with each other, so that when you pull the trigger, the bullet goes exactly where you want it to go. In this case, it was the X encircled in a circle. That's zeroing in your weapon.
Okay.
And they get 9 rounds to get it in the X or as close to the X as possible. And then the concentric circles that are around the small X zero, the X within that smaller circle, all equal out to points: 10, 9, 8, 7, 5. She zeroed her weapon with 6 rounds. She turns to me and says, I got it, Sergeant Major, thank you. I get out of the hole and I said, Sergeant, you're relieved, go home.
Oh. And I think you just proved the point, or just illustrated the point about how someone could affect the performance of another person, whether positively or negatively. I guess you showed both ends of that in that story.
Yes, Gary. The other perplexing aspect of our lives today is people think that a title makes you a leader, and a title gives you status, gives you position, gives you authority, but it doesn't make you a leader.
Yes.
There are people in workplaces that have no titles, no status, and they lead very effectively through their influential leadership style. And everybody loves and respects this guy because he's an easygoing guy who can be firm and tough when he or she needs to through influence.
And authority sometimes gets in the way with influencing.
Yes.
Felix has another story where he mentions the Institute of Management Consultants and the Carolinas chapter. I added some links in the show notes. Here's Felix.
So Ira Miller is a member of the Institute of Management Consultants in the Carolinas chapter. And about 5 years ago, he did a presentation on how to market one's services. And he said, let me use as an example, Felix Nater, whom you all know. He doesn't know it, but his greatest strengths are his personal strengths. His personal strengths enable him to penetrate almost any environment because he knows who he is and he presents himself as he is. So I would say to you all is, because I know and you know your strengths from your skills and the knowledge you have, why don't you take a little bit from his page and adapt it to your page and make your personal strengths more formidable in the interaction and integration of your conversations and services that you offer with your clients. So if you have a particular background that differentiates you from the competition, don't dwell on your skills, dwell on the background that allows you to build a rapport with the people you're trying to sell to. And that is, Gary, when people hear me speak, when I do webinars, I have to be very, very careful because they're not really listening to the content. They're listening to the mood, the temperament, the delivery, the at ease feeling, the conveyance, the connection. And that worries me because to the point where I had to rewrite an evaluation form many years ago that said, did you get anything from the presentation? Are you going to use what you received from the presentation? Will it change your attitude? Will it improve your performance? And will it make a behavioral impact? Because they were saying he spoke well. He caught my attention. He knew how to communicate. I don't want to hear those things. I want to be able to break the barrier, penetrate the barrier, to be able to seep in important information because you're listening to me and not listening at me.
Yeah, it's a difference between entertainment or edutainment and actual learning.
Yes. He made me think about having more trust and confidence in my personal side as opposed to having more trust and confidence in my professional side.
Part 3, Congruency Strengthens Character. For many of us, how we talk and act around subordinates is different than how we talk and act around peers, or when we're talking to our bosses or customers. Even how we behave around family and friends could be a lot different than how we behave around other professionals. In his own way, Felix addresses this. Again, here's Felix.
I believe that you have to walk the talk and talk the walk all the time. I believe you have to be real, you have to be genuine, and you have to be authentic in every single interaction, no matter whether it's family, friends, at a bar, at work, testimony in a trial, interviewing. It's got to be one congruent Felix Nater, one congruent person that people see as being the same thing constantly and consistently and persistently. Real to people enables them to open up to you and tell you things that would blow your socks away. Real is attracting relationships like yours, Gary, like guys, like other people that are so personal that they don't know how we develop this relationship. And they really do know, because it's all relates back to how comfortable I feel around Gary, how comfortable I feel around Guy. So I would say, remove the veneer and let it all hang out. Like Mark Steven says, be a spectacle so that people get to see your authenticity. People can be attracted to you because you're a real person. And people trust you because when you say you're going to do something, you feel prideful in wanting to make that person happy by doing exactly what you said you were going to do. So walk the walk and talk the talk is the best way that I can put it.
Let me throw a way of interpreting what you're trying to say. When you're doing this, when you're being genuine and when you're being congruent, your thoughts, your feelings reflect what you're saying and what you're doing. There's no hidden agenda. All those things are congruent.
Yes. I testified at a federal level on one of my cases from my Postal Inspector career in retirement. That was a significant case that hinged on my testimony. And the judge interrupted the plaintiff attorney and said, Sergeant Major, Inspector Nater, Mr. Nater, do you understand the question? The question was, why did you violate postal policy in conducting this particular investigation that caused you to step outside of the rules and regulations. And you know, a lie is a lie. And people, whether people really recognize it or not, you know it's a lie. So you have to tell the truth. So I said, Your Honor, safety and security was more paramount to me than following a silly rule that would have caused the plaintiff to be injured, if not killed. So I chose to cut corners to save people's lives. And he said, he leaned back in his chair. He didn't know what to say. Make a long story short, the Postal Service prevailed. The jury unanimously rendered their decision in favor of the Postal Service. And those kinds of stories, Gary, make me feel good, because the reason why I didn't become the Army Reserve Command Sergeant Major was because another two-star general said he was doing an anonymous investigation. I may have told you the story, into my background, because complaints that my awards were fictitious, the accomplishments were fictitious. And I said, General, I'm an open book. I'm an open book. Did you say it was an anonymous complaint? And he says, yes, Sergeant Major. Washington wants us to look at it because your reputation is very important. I said, General, you just said it was an anonymous complaint, and you said my reputation was very important. And I stood up and I said, there's nobody in this room, to myself. And I said, General, you can shove this anonymous complaint up your ass. I'm retiring.
Well, you know, I'm going to pull back from the first part of the conversation. This is a reflection of character. You know, your congruency, the way you present yourself, the way you behave, all this has to do with how you build your mental and moral qualities and capabilities.
I'm a nobody, Gary. Nobodies have to have substance, have to have character. In the third grade, my Catholic school teacher told my father, who couldn't speak English, and I was just learning how to speak English, we have to retain Felix another year in the third grade. He's improving on his English, but we think that one more year would be beneficial for him, as opposed to moving him on. And my father was limited in English, said, if that's what you want to do, do it. And today, people are angry at me because I claim to be an African-American by looking at me. I am a Puerto Rican by descent, but I'm an American first. And people say, you don't sound like a Puerto Rican and you don't act like a black guy. I'm an American first, and me, I revolve around the notion of the intangibles. Those are more important than the tangibles.
I love it.
So I'm a nobody. You know, I'm someone who everybody thinks of me the way you think of me. And I think of me as someone who got an opportunity because God said, I'm going to make you with challenges, then I'm going to evaluate how you overcome those hurdles along the way. And you've done kiddo. That's why you are where you are today. I firmly believe that, Gary.
Wouldn't this world be such a beautiful place if we had more nobodies? My thanks to Felix for joining us. And if you want to learn more about Felix, go to the show notes for links. Also, if you go to unlabeledleadership.com, there's an icon for messages. If you want, leave a voicemail message. I think it's up to 1 minute. And make a comment or ask a question. Maybe I'll play it on the air. If you decide to rate the show, give it a review, include a comment about what in the show helped you in particular, and maybe I'll read that on the air. On the website, if you want, you can click support. That will enable you to help us keep these shows going. Finally, thank you for listening to the show. Until next time, lead on.